Is there such thing as too much freedom? It depends on who you ask and what they want to do with it. Today we're going to talk about the problems you have when you're at the upper threshold of freedom, and we're going to talk about solutions too. I propose a technical solution that can solve some of the problems that come from freedom without infringing upon it. And we're also going to talk about having discussions with your political rivals and circumstances under which smart people can disagree. I think this is really helpful for not hating your opponents in a polarized society. Welcome to the All Things Borderless Monday Morning Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Supertramp. All right, you've heard me rant about tech for this long. Are you ready for my tech pitch of the week? It is an app/web service called GloPoll, like global, but poll. And what it is going to do, it is so simple yet so disruptive. It takes polls on any question that you want to ask globally. And here's the one part where it gets novel, is it needs verified users. And it will have verified users all over the country. So basically you've got to prove who you are, so you can't vote twice, because that's the problem with anonymous voting. People can vote as many times as they want. So you got to confirm your users. But what it will do is it will just be a forum for asking any question. You can ask anything you want, and you share it with your friends, see who asks it, but then eventually the ones that are trending will be, showcased. So picture, I don't want to say change.org because I really dislike the format of that, but anyone can make a petition and then you can get people to sign it. But instead, this is you ask a question and you get global answers. And the reason why I think that it's easy to see why it's simple, but it's worth thinking about how this could change the world. The benefit it would do is it would let you see how other people in the world feel about whatever the issue is at hand, say climate change. You can see the polls on how much of the world seems to care about this, how much of my state seems to care about this, how much of my country and how much of my town. And it might build solidarity because you might find out that there's a majority of people in your state who feel a certain way. Oh, and then it will compare you against your legislators too. So that'll be the fun part too. So it'll show you your representatives at the national, state, and local level. And it'll just be really cute because you'll be able to gauge consensus of verified users, and you'll be able to gauge that against how your legislators vote. So at the very least, that is going to be fuel for thought. But at the very most, it can be a tool for legislators and will increase transparency. I would like this service, not even for the poll aspect of it, but just to get people in touch with who their representatives are. So there's a lot of really cool things you can do with it, and it'll all be under the hood of one platform. So basically all you got to do, put in your name. When you're posting, you can use a pseudonym, but the platform needs to know who you are so that there aren't duplicates. It needs to know where you live so it knows how to count your vote. And that's all. And then you can ask questions and answer questions and see how your idea relates to people across the world or across the street. I think that information is worth having in itself, but then GloPoll could also connect you with news updates that relate to your issue in your area. You would have to be very judicious about how you do the news. You do not want to be spam. You want to give people actionable information. And that's why the press is allocated so much freedom in the US and a lot of other states, is because they're supposed to give you actionable information to help you be a good citizen, which when the rubber meets the road, it's how you vote. But what I've been getting from the media a lot is Trump said this, Trump said that, and it's he said, she said, and that's not news. And you have to be some type of masochist to watch that news. It doesn't help you vote. But I'm hoping the news updates that would be distributed through GloPoll would be the criteria. Is this actionable information? And if so, this is news worth spreading. And there's one more direction you could go with this. GloPoll, it could actually be a public interest group where it would show the consensus it has on a certain issue, and it would use that consensus as a lever to try and inspire elected officials to vote a certain way or another. So that's what usually happens with public interest groups. So they don't have money to bribe the politicians, but they can show how popular their issue is and promote it on that basis. So GloPoll could eventually become a policy changing lever. And if you want to go one step further, you could actually monetize GloPoll. You have to attach a search engine. It has to be better than Bing. But if you have a search engine, users can generate money through their browsing habits. It is pretty amazing that a thing people like to do can generate money. So this would require GloPoll to maybe compartmentalize its money-making aspect, but the benefit of that would be once GloPoll has money, not only can it lobby just through public calling on officials to vote a certain way, but they would actually have money. And where it would get really interesting is once GloPoll has a budget, because that means people could vote. So let's say everyone in the world is worried about climate change, or let's say like 90% of the people in the world are worried about climate change, 100% of the people in the Philippines are worried about climate change. Everyone on GloPoll has one vote. So once GloPoll actually has a budget, then people can vote on the most effective way to use that budget. And the most effective way that money might be used is by lobbying the US government. And I don't agree with how much influence money has on our politics, but that becomes a question of what you consider free speech, and that's a long-winded conversation that it's not easily solvable. But putting money on the side of fighting climate change is easy because the money's on the other side, right? It's a popular issue to fight climate change, but the money is saying deny climate change. So what GloPoll would have the big picture ability to do is to allocate where that budget is best allocated for democratic lobbying. So that's GloPoll. I hope you like it. It could be used just for gathering consent. It could be used just for fun. It could be used for getting in touch with your politicians and just knowing which ones you're supposed to be keeping track of. It would be helpful for keeping you up to date on issues that you seem to care about. And it could be a guide for politicians to see where public opinion is going, because they may have flawed statistics, and this would be pretty pure. But the one tricky part is you need to have verified users, because otherwise people can be counting their votes a lot. But that's GloPoll. It's worthy in itself, and then there's a bunch of steps it could grow through to really change the world. It's disruptive and simple, and that's why I like it. GloPoll. That's a big idea. That's an all things borderless idea. That is tech bringing the world together where we are as one and we can compare our votes. Here's what I like about it. It doesn't expect the system to change, because I think about democracy a lot, and because of that I think about corruption a lot, because in the US, ever since the Citizens United court ruling, money equals free speech as of the current interpretation, but it's very hard to overturn that ruling. So, for the time being, money equals free speech, and who does that benefit? People with money. I thought votes were what counted, but money matters a lot. Politicians, they need the money to re-elect. I've talked about corruption on here a lot of times, so I'm not going to get too into it. And that is a system worth changing. Great minds like Lawrence Lessig and Dan Carlin, my podcast idol, they contemplate fixing corruption all the time, and that's a worthy goal in itself. But what's so interesting about GloPoll is it plays by the rules that exist now, which is saying, okay, if money matters, we'll manage a huge budget of money gathered through browsing history, and now we can lobby governments. If money is what makes change, we have money. If consensus is what changes, we have consensus. So it's very compatible with the way things are, not the way I would like to see things be. But if things were to move in a more one person, one vote direction, it would be useful in the future as well. So that's GloPoll. That's my idea. I stand behind it. Who's going to help me build it? I'll do the marketing. I will do some basics, but I don't know how to build a website and an app and deploy it globally and check user IDs, verify your stuff. It's a little beyond me at this time. And maybe I'll get there on my own, just taking my Python tutorials on YouTube. but there's a chance that something similar will already exist by the time I do it myself. So I need a team. Who's going to help me do it? All right, it's time to talk about freedom problems. I say problems because when you have too much freedom, you have to take in a lot of things that you might not like. I always like to say freedom equals freedom to be an asshole. So Apple has freedom, but they also have freedom to be assholes and say you have to use our proprietary products. We have you in brand cuffs. That's a really cute term I learned from a college humor video. Brand cuffs, where you have the brand and then you're locked in to buy all their accessories too. And I think that's a public interest issue. I think it makes everyone mad, but Apple is free to do that. So how are you going to stop that without abridging freedom? That's just an example of the problems you run into when you have, let's say there's a balance of you can have too much freedom or not enough freedom or the right amount, which is subjective. But I'm going to say in the US, we err on the side of too much freedom, and then we live with the consequences, sometimes even when they're ugly. So the corruption problem that I'm hoping to circumvent with GloPoll it's a freedom problem, because right now the justification of infinite money being spent on political campaigns is that spending your money is free speech. And I disagree with that interpretation, but it's logically sound. So if that's how if you interpret that money equals free speech, then damn, how are we ever going to stop the influence of money? And there are people out there who are saying it's a good thing. But what makes me happy is I think the people who are pro what I call corruption, because come on, what are you going to call it? Bribery? The people who are pro corruption, they have a huge obstacle in a democracy, and that is you need a lot of people to vote on it. So we do need a lot of people to vote on it to overturn that awful court ruling, Citizens United. But at the same time, you're going to need to convince 3/4 of the states. Let's say if you want to do constitutional amendment, if you want to just do away with votes entirely and just let the free market dictate everything, you're going to have to convince a lot of people that that's in their best interest. I'm just not rich enough yet where I think one person, one vote is a bad thing. You know, I bet as you get richer, you start to be like, man, I wish money was how voting was done, because then I would have more than one. So I totally understand why the wealthy people want their votes to count more. But the thing is, if you give that to them, then they have even more power to do it again and again and again. And eventually, if you let money equal power, they're going to concentrate more power for themselves at the expense of voters, and eventually money will mean more and more over time relative to votes. And if you think it through to the logical conclusion, eventually votes will mean nothing or next to nothing, and money will mean everything. There are a bunch of other ways people interpret freedom too. One is freedom from taxation, right? Because taxation is being enslaved. So therefore, anytime the government wants to do something that spends a tax dollar, which must come from you, as per our social contract, that equals enslavement. So some people, like libertarians, they seem to interpret their freedom as freedom not to be taxed. Some people, like Ben Shapiro, he interprets the freedom of association, which is also part of our First Amendment. He interprets freedom of association to mean that businesses can discriminate against who they do business with. So racial discrimination is okay by that logic, and any other type of discrimination is okay too. And the way these people rationalize that is they say, hey, if the businesses are really so bad, it's only a matter of time till another business puts them out of business. But that puts a huge amount of social responsibility on businesses, and I don't know that businesses are bound by any type of responsibility. And there can be a huge time delay. So let's say an electric company wants to discriminate against me for some belief that I have. Do you really think that in a timely manner, another electric company's, do you think everyone's gonna care? Okay, if in the government, there's protections for minorities. But if a business wants to discriminate against a minority, they could just deny me internet service because they don't like me. And I don't think that's going to enrage enough people that we're going to do a collective boycott of this certain internet company before another one can move into town. And by the way, the whole vote with your money thing, guess who that benefits? People with money. And also, the power to boycott is very, very limited. I am very skeptical when people say, oh, if you don't like it, just do a boycott. A boycott is a lack of an action. It's not an action in itself. So that's why I'm not really too enamored by solving everything with boycotts. And once again, it's only a meaningful method of change for those with money. Now, libertarians, each one is going to tell you a different story. The fullest expression of libertarians are anarcho-capitalists who want literally no government, and they think the free market will make everyone richer. And statistically, the free market does make a country richer, but it's not evenly distributed. There are winners and losers. So the GDP per capita will probably go up if you sign some type of free trade deal, but it's also just as likely to not be evenly distributed. So that means more concentration of wealth. And people like Ben Shapiro, they're going to say the concentration of wealth isn't a bad thing. But come on, think it through to the logical conclusion. If one person had almost everything and then everyone else had nothing, there's definitely a point. And it's hard work because you got to do the math, but there is a certain point where inequality becomes bad, okay? And I think we might be there already. Do you? But what's funny about libertarians, or I'll just talk about Ben Shapiro specifically, he's conservative, but he says he's libertarian on issues. And I'll just say right now, I like his show because he can hold a good argument and he's philosophically consistent, even if I consistently disagree with him. But I like the consistency. So he's totally libertarian in the sense that he doesn't want to be taxed. He doesn't want to pay for anything. He doesn't want to pay more in taxes ever, unless it's for the military. The second most expensive thing that we do, the first most expensive is our Medicare program, which is, there's a lot of fat in there, so it doesn't need to cost as much as it does. So if you hate tax, I would hope that you would want our Medicare system to be more efficient. And I would hope that if being taxed equals enslavement, I hope you would want our military to spend its money a little more wisely. But anyhow, for some reason, libertarians tend to favor the military. But aside from that, they are against any form of taxation. And there was a discussion I had last week, and I was just thinking, how crazy is it that doctors in the US, they need to pay about $250,000 out of pocket to go to medical school, but soldiers, they get free training from the state? How is it that the state thinks soldiers are worth all this free training, which their training costs about $100,000 if you care? What makes soldiers worth training with public money, but not doctors? So since you're here, I can justify what I was saying. The military protects American lives, right? And that's a worthy goal, worth spending phenomenal amounts of tax money on. So why isn't it a worthy goal to train doctors? Because it's hard for me to imagine that $250,000 school bill isn't going to reduce the amount of doctors we have. Something we need. We only have 2 per 1,000 people, which is not so good. And an aging population. So if the role of the government is to look out for the well-being of his people, I think training doctors is totally within its mandate. But then my buddy comes in and he says, the role of the military isn't to protect American lives, it's to protect freedom. All right, now freedom can mean a lot of different things, but let's play with that. So that means all the military's job is to make sure we don't get invaded, right? Because our freedom really only ends when a foreign entity invades our country and takes away our Constitution. And in that capacity, I would say mission accomplished. We are not at risk of that. So is everything the military does protecting freedom? And do you condemn everything they do that is overkill, above and beyond keeping us from being invaded? The National Guard comes into areas of public emergency, and I can't name anyone who would be against that. But then also the war on terror in itself is to protect American lives. We spend a lot of money to to protect a few American lives, to prevent terror. Because terrorism can never take away our freedom, because it can never beat the US. All it can do is cause losses. All it can do is kill Americans. So I think the whole entire war on terror is more to protect American lives than it is to save freedom, because our freedom's going to be fine. Our freedom can endure a few car bombings, many car bombings. So I think the military definitely does protect American lives. So are you okay with that? Are you okay that tax money is spent to protect Americans from being in terror attacks? Most people I know would probably say yes. So the follow-up question to that is, what makes it worth $1 or several bucks to prevent an American from dying in a terror attack, but not worth it to make sure that there's enough doctors to take care of Americans? This isn't charity, this is investment. So why is the military so sexy, but then investing in making sure we have a robust healthcare system, it becomes called socialism by the opponents? And this is where smart people can disagree. It really comes down to your answer to this question: what do you think the role of the government is? Is it to make the lives of the citizens better, or is it just to protect freedom? Or is it something else? So our disagreement, it was stemming from different answers to this question of what is the role of government. So what I like about the long debate that we had is it shows that there's room for smart people to disagree, and it's just based on a philosophical question which becomes subjective. So now it's time to ask, what do you think the role of government is? Is it to look out for the well-being of its citizens and to make sure that they're taken care of? Or is it just to preserve freedom and literally prevent your government from being taken over? Or is it something else? And this is exactly the type of question that I want to ask with GloPoll. Once GloPoll is up and running, that is going to be the first question I type into it. What is the role of government? Is it to protect lives of the citizens? Is it to promote the well-being of the citizens? Or, of course, fill in the blank. All right, thanks for listening. I'm Jamie Supertramp, and I'll see you the next time around. You can give it a like or a subscribe, whatever, but also stay tuned for my screencast channel, where I'm going to be doing more screencasts with narrative. And if you are enticed by the GloPoll idea that I pitched this time around, come talk to me and we can hash out the ideas and talk about implementation. All right, see you next time. Bye.